The pre-dawn tranquility of our quiet suburban cul-de-sac was shattered by the sound of breaking glass, a violent intrusion that jolted me from a deep sleep. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stumbled out of bed, a baseball bat instinctively finding its way into my hand. Through the splintered remains of my garage door window, a sight both surreal and infuriating unfolded. My prized 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, my late father's meticulously restored legacy, was being backed down my driveway by a tow truck. And behind the wheel of my car, barking orders at the tow truck driver with the imperious authority of a five-star general, was none other than Karen Henderson, our HOA president, her bleached blonde hair perfectly coiffed even at 3 a.m., an official-looking HOA windbreaker incongruously thrown over her pajamas. Before I could fully process this audacious theft in progress, a figure, silhouetted by the tow truck's harsh headlights, stepped into its path. My 82-year-old grandfather, in his bathrobe and slippers, his old wooden cane planted firmly on the asphalt, he stood as an unwavering bulwark. The headlights illuminated his weathered face, etched with an expression of pure, unyielding determination, a look I hadn't seen since he recounted tales of his service in Korea. This, I knew, was more than just a dispute over a classic car. This was a stand. Let me rewind 3 months. I'd moved into this seemingly peaceful neighborhood to help care for my grandfather. The house, a family heirloom, predated the HOA's very existence. With me came my father's Mustang, a gleaming Highland green testament to countless hours of shared passion, a car that was less a vehicle and more a sacred relic. The first week was idyllic, friendly waves, compliments on the Mustang. Then I met Karen Henderson. She appeared at our door one Tuesday, clipboard in hand, a sour expression that seemed permanently etched onto her face. In a nasal voice dripping with condescension, she informed me that my Mustang violated HOA Regulation 17.3 subsection B, a rule, apparently, mandating all vehicles be parked in enclosed garages overnight. I politely explained that our 2-car garage was already occupied by my grandfather's Buick and his beloved workshop, where he meticulously restored vintage radios. "That's not my problem," she'd sniffed, thrusting a warning notice into my hand. Over the ensuing weeks, Karen's campaign against my Mustang escalated into a full-blown obsession. She'd patrol past our house at all hours, her phone camera constantly clicking, her ever-present clipboard filling with notes. Complaints were filed. The car was leaking oil. It wasn't. The chrome bumpers created a glare hazard, a new low in absurdity. At an HOA meeting, she even suggested, with a straight face, that classic cars like mine attracted the wrong element and brought down property values. My grandfather, a man of quiet dignity who had mostly kept to himself since my grandmother passed, began to take notice. He'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, observing Karen's bizarre surveillance rituals. One morning, with a deceptively friendly tone, he called out, asking if she'd like to inspect the Mustang's engine. Karen practically fled, muttering about unauthorized modifications. I tried reason. I attended HOA meetings, armed with documentation proving the Mustang was registered, insured, and impeccably maintained. I even offered the olive branch of covering it at night. Nothing appeased Karen. The Mustang, it seemed, was a personal affront to her authority, a gleaming green symbol of defiance in her carefully regulated kingdom. Then came the morning I walked outside to an empty driveway. No note, no warning, just a gaping void where my father's Mustang should have been. My grandfather, his face a mask of grim resolve, was already on the phone with the police. The responding officer, clearly embarrassed, informed us the car had been towed to an impound lot across town on the HOA president's order, claiming the vehicle was abandoned on private property. Abandoned? A car I drove every Sunday, washed every other week, a car half the neighborhood had seen me lovingly polish just the day before. The officer, muttering about HOA overreach, gave us the impound lots address. The impound fee was $400, extortion for a tow I never authorized, based on a patently false claim. My grandfather, his jaw set in that familiar, unyielding line, insisted on accompanying me. We paid, documented everything, and I drove my Mustang home, Grandpa following protectively in his Buick. As we pulled into our driveway, there was Karen, phone out, recording our return, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She shouted something about us regretting our defiance. Grandpa simply tipped his veteran's cap, his voice calm but edged with steel, and suggested she might want to review the laws regarding theft and false reporting. Her face turned a fascinating shade of purple before she stomped away. For the next few days, an uneasy quiet settled. Too quiet. I installed a security camera focused on the driveway, ensuring all footage was saved to the cloud. Grandpa, claiming a sore back, started sleeping in his recliner in the living room, a silent, unwavering sentinel. We were both waiting. We didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, the shattering glass of the garage door window announced Karen's return. But this time, she hadn't outsourced her dirty work. My security camera feed, now playing out in real time on my phone, showed her inside our garage, fumbling with wires under the Mustang's steering column, muttering about teaching us a lesson. She was trying to hotwire my car. Grandpa must have heard the glass break first. By the time I raced outside, barefoot and adrenaline-fueled, he was already there, emerging from the shadows of the porch. He walked purposefully to the driver's side door, his cane in one hand, and in the other, something that made my blood run cold. His old service revolver, a nickel-plated relic from his Korean War days, usually kept under glass in his study. I knew it wasn't loaded. He'd shown me the empty chambers years ago, a lesson in responsible gun ownership. But Karen didn't know that. She froze, her hands flying up from under the steering column, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning terror as the porch light glinted off the barrel. Grandpa's voice, when he spoke, was the voice of a commander, imbued with all the authority of his military years. He ordered her out of the vehicle, face down on the garage floor, until the police arrived. Karen, ever the blusterer, tried to argue, waving a printed copy of the HOA bylaws she'd inexplicably brought with her on her Grand Theft Auto adventure, claiming she had HOA authority to confiscate vehicles. Grandpa simply smiled, a chillingly calm expression, and pointed to the blinking red light of the security camera I'd installed. "Tell it to the judge, ma'am." And the camera. The police, 2 officers I hadn't seen before, arrived within minutes. Karen, still prone on the garage floor, immediately launched into her defense, insisting she was merely performing her presidential duties, that we were the real criminals for defying community standards. One officer took her proffered HOA bylaws, his expression unreadable, while his partner reviewed the crystal-clear security footage on my phone, footage of Karen breaking and entering, attempting to hotwire a vehicle, all while narrating her intent to teach us a lesson. I'll never forget the officer's deadpan voice when he looked up from the bylaws. "Ma'am," he said, his tone utterly devoid of sympathy, "I've read these documents. There's nothing in here, absolutely nothing, that gives anyone the right to break into private property, attempt to steal a vehicle, or, frankly, act like a complete lunatic." He then turned to Karen, his professional demeanor firmly in place, and informed her she was under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted Grand Theft Auto, and destruction of property. The look on Karen's face was priceless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as they read her rights. She sputtered about her position, about the HOA board backing her, about how this was all a terrible misunderstanding. The officers, remarkably patient, cuffed her and led her to the squad car, even as she threatened to sue everyone from the police department to the mayor of Houston. Word of Karen's spectacular, middle-of-the-night downfall spread through Pinewood Gardens like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew. Neighbors, previously cowed by Karen's reign, stopped by to check on us, sharing their own hushed stories of her overreach. The young couple fined for the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. The family harassed for their children's chalk drawings on their own driveway. The elderly woman forced to remove her beloved bird feeders. It turned out we weren't her only targets. We were just the ones who finally had irrefutable, caught-on-camera proof of her escalating madness. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting that evening. The community center was packed, a sea of faces I'd never seen at previous, sparsely attended gatherings. When the agenda item, HOA president's position, vacancy due to pending criminal charges, was announced, someone in the back shouted, "Elect Grandpa Carver." The room erupted in applause and laughter. The board, likely seeing the writing on the wall, and perhaps the pitchforks gathering outside, voted unanimously to remove Karen from her position, effective immediately. They also voted to review all recent fines and violations she'd issued. When they got to my case, the acting president formally apologized on behalf of the board and announced that all fines and fees related to my Mustang would be refunded. But the real justice, the kind that sticks, came 2 weeks later at Karen's court hearing. She stood before the judge, still clinging to the delusion that she had been acting within her rights as HOA president. The judge, a woman who seemed to be struggling valiantly not to roll her eyes, reviewed the damning security footage, the police reports, and the testimony from multiple neighbors detailing Karen's pattern of harassment and intimidation. Karen Henderson was found guilty on all charges. The judge, citing her abuse of a position of trust and her blatant disregard for the law, sentenced her to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, perhaps, a wag in the courtroom later suggested, picking up abandoned HOA bylaws from various driveways, and ordered her to pay full restitution for the damage to our garage door and the fraudulent impound fees. The total came to nearly $5,000. When the judge announced the sentence, Karen's face went white as a sheet. She actually swayed on her feet, her carefully constructed world of self-importance and petty tyranny crashing down around her in the stark reality of a criminal courtroom. Her lawyer had to steady her as she whispered repeatedly, "This can't be happening, this can't be happening." But it was happening. And as I drove my father's Mustang, home that afternoon with Grandpa beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, the sun glinting off its Highland green paint, I couldn't help but smile. Some folks think a clipboard and a vendetta make them sheriff of suburbia. Karen Henderson learned, the hard way, that sometimes the quietest neighbor, the one with the old car and the even older grandfather, might just have a few surprises and a very well-placed security camera up their sleeve. The reign of Karen was over, not with a whimper, but with the satisfying click of handcuffs and the thud of a judge's gavel.